I've had quite the interesting career in politics. I came into politics from a long career in business where, and a very senior level, where I thought there was a lot of politics in business, and I realised I hadn't seen anything when I hit Westminster in 2015. I was elected to the Scottish Parliament in 2021. Now, the few remarks I will make are as somebody who was already very experienced, who had a long senior career, and I thought at that time I was well prepared, that I was articulate, that I could hold my own in my areas of interest, which are mostly around business and finance. Now, Joanna here, I think, can speak very eloquently about what the House of Commons in Westminster's like, but my perception was, immediately upon entering, it was a bullying culture. Now, I had seen that before. I worked at large kind of international banks, and the way I chose to adopt it went right back to the city that I grew up in, which is Glasgow. In Glasgow, if somebody gives you a bit of trouble, or as we would say, snash, you go up to them and say, come here, and say that. And what that's really saying is you square up to them and say, I'm up for your challenge, come and meet me halfway, and really quite overtly, kind of passive aggressive. And I found that worked very well in the culture of Westminster, and to be honest, although I had some interesting challenges, which we may get into, that served me very well. In Holyrood, it's an altogether very, very different culture, much more inward-looking, I would say. Regrettably, I find it somewhat parochial. And most notably, the women in that legislature don't look out for each other in the way that they should do. Now, I think when we get into the general discussion, I'll bring out some of my observations about percentages of women in this role and that role. But is it fair to say that I have always noticed a difference in the treatment of men and women? Absolutely. Have I always noticed a difference in access for men and women? Well, absolutely. Have I indeed noticed a difference where my approach of come here and say that, is felt to be a little threatening? Because, of course, I'm not signing up to the received wisdom about, oh, do you like my jacket? And do you like my shoes? That's just not for me. And particularly around taking people on around business and finance and economics. And I know we're going to get into a more general debate around support, education, access to funds. That's something that's often missed off. How do women get a seat at the top table if they can't play in the same league? And I think we'll come on to that, but that's probably a few introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. Sue.
Thank you very much. So make sure all these mics are working, got lots of them from different people. So my journey here is a wee bit different to Michelle's, but it's not. It's actually quite similar as well, because I have a background in business. I was 20 years with Johnson & Johnson, and then I'll just stop.
Yeah.
And do you want to take that?
No, that one is the room.
Oh my goodness, right, so we have to have two microphones. So I went from Johnson & Johnson to running my own small business, and then following a very enjoyable campaign for the Better Together team in 2014, I then was asked to step up and become a member of the Scottish Conservative Party, and I said yes, where I became a councillor, and I'm now an MSP for the Lothian region. And in one of my many roles in Parliament right now, I'm the Scottish Conservative Party member on the new gender-sensitive audit group, which is there to try and get a sense of some of the pressures and differences that women face in Parliament. And each of those chapters has really deepened or reinforced, perhaps, the barriers that women face in all sorts of life. Because when I worked in J&J, that was from 1996 to, well, you can do the maths, I took on a role within the brand new Women's Leadership Initiative, WLI, and I was the UK representative on that group. And that was about investing in real structural change, mentoring programs, leadership academies, and making sure men were allies to us, and really addressing those microaggressions in the workplace. And that wasn't just a tick box exercise, and it really was part of the culture. But even though at that time my franchise had a female global president, I had the same usual biases you get from male bosses, and I still have my Nokia phone with some of the text messages that he sent me in a drawer, should it ever be required. But at the same time, when I moved into that small business, I did have a different experience, and I know Michelle has already alluded to some of that. Accessing finance, because you run the CPG for Women's Enterprise, so some of this is familiar. Building networks, balancing the growth of the business, and could it grow with the family responsibilities that I was managing. And it was a real stark reminder that while there was corporate initiatives to support women, especially entrepreneurs, they still face really, really systemic barriers, and it's really, really tough out there. So we need to understand what the realities of women's lives are, support more women into STEM and digital, which I think is a really good thing going forward. And it's about the understanding our caring responsibilities, because we have them at all points in our lives, don't we? When we have our young families, and then when our parents become elderly and you're caring for them, which is something I'm really experiencing right now. But one of the most powerful lessons I took from my time at Johnson & Johnson, and I've always worked with that, is engaging men as allies, and that gender isn't just a women's issue, it's a leadership issue. And I do feel that the Conservative Party has supported me at every step of my time. Is that my 5 minutes? So with that, I will just quickly move on to Joanna. And I have to give you this one as well.
Okay. Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for asking me to take part today. I was elected a member of the British Parliament just shortly before my 50th birthday, having had a career in law prior to that. And I came into politics because I was enthused by the independence referendum. On the other side from Sue, on the pro-independence side, although we do actually get on very well. After we lost the referendum, the late great Alex Salmond, who's much missed, realised that if the 45% of people in Scotland who'd voted yes, voted for the SNP, we would have a landslide. And we all thought he was mad, but as usual, he turned out to be right. And he went about encouraging people like myself and Michelle and Tasmina, who had a hinterland outside politics, to stand as candidates. And we all got elected as MPs. And I served at Westminster for 9 years. I just lost my seat last year at the general election. And during that time, I spent 6 years as a frontbench spokesperson on Justice and Home Affairs for my party, and 2 years as chair of the UK Parliament's Joint Committee on Human Rights, and also some time as a backbencher. So I've seen politics from the perspective of somebody who came late to politics and had a career before that, rather than approaching politics itself as a professional career. And I've also seen politics from the very different perspectives of a frontbench spokesperson, a backbencher, and a committee chair. And in the short time we have as our introductory remarks, I just want to list 3 negatives and 3 positives I took from my time in politics. And these would apply across the board, but I'm going to say something from a feminist perspective as well. The first negative, both the Scottish and British parliaments the government has far too much power at expense of parliamentary scrutiny. This enabled Boris Johnson to shut down Parliament, albeit unlawfully, when Parliament wouldn't do what he wanted back during the Brexit crisis and before he had a majority. And it's also enabled a Labour government to be elected with a huge majority on the back of less than 34% of the popular vote. And I don't think that's very good for our democracy. Second negative, we now largely have a professional political class. People go into politics straight out of college or university. They don't bring experience from outside politics with them, and because it's a career for them, they are far too craven in towing the party line, and so we don't see the same diversity of viewpoints in political parties any longer, which I think is bad for our society. Third negative point, the tenor of our public debate. The tenor of our public debate has really descended in recent times. And in Scottish and British politics, it has included threats to freedom of expression and freedom of belief. We see these most particularly in the field of what I call the gender wars, the fight between sex realists and people who believe in gender identity theory. And also we see it in the reaction to the Israel-Palestine conflict, where people are being prevented from stating their legitimate concerns. I find this a very unfortunate development in Scottish and British politics. I think it's particularly bad for women, the nastiness of our public debate, the personalising of it and the viciousness of it. And I have to say, if I had known in 2014 what I was letting myself in for in politics, I would never have stood as an MP. But I don't regret it, because it was a wonderful experience and a privilege. But I do hesitate when people ask me honestly, particularly young women, to advise them about whether or not they should have a political career. And now for the three positives, just quickly. Despite the fact that our governments have too much power in the UK, the importance of the rule of law has been upheld by the constitutional role of the judiciary in the United Kingdom, and that's been underlined by recent events. Boris Johnson unlawfully prorogued Parliament, and backbenchers like myself prevented him from doing that by taking an action all the way to the Supreme Court, which ruled the prorogation of Parliament unlawful. Equally, here in Scotland, we have grassroots feminists and backbench politicians taking our government and public institutions to court in order to protect women's rights and having great successes. And I think that's a really good thing in a liberal democracy. Second positive, the power of cross-party working. We wouldn't have our devolved Scottish Parliament if it wasn't for cross-party working. And during the Brexit crisis, we had to work cross-party to afford a proper opposition to Boris Johnson, because the Labour Party was so hopelessly divided and weakly led. Third, the power of the committee system. If you have strong committees with independently elected chairs and independently appointed parliamentarians, then they can really hold the government to account. That happens at Westminster, but it doesn't happen in the Scottish Parliament, where the chairs and the members of the committee are too beholden to the government and the party whips. And that's something we need to change in Scotland. So I think I would tie up by saying politics is a difficult environment for anyone who goes into it. I think women face particular challenges, as women do in all walks of life, because of our biology. Our biology is our destiny, and because we live in a patriarchal society. But politics is too important for it to be left just to the political professional class. And I think it's really important for people from all walks of life. And I don't just mean people with professional and business backgrounds like myself and Tasmina and Sue and Michelle. And with apologies to my colleagues who I don't know so well, I mean people who just have a background. I don't care if somebody's been sweeping the streets before they go into Parliament. We need people with a background. And in the old days in the British Parliament, the Labour Party used to have lots of MPs who were working class. There's fewer and fewer MPs now who actually are from working class backgrounds. And I think that's a real problem in our society. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting to listen to your different stories. I'm Eva Biaudet and I'm from Finland, and I actually been always a politician. I think actually I got my sort of awakening when I was 7 years old, and I think there was the first, I don't know what to do with that, the first TV news about famine in Biafra. And as a little child, I saw the pictures of children dying, and I just felt that I had to save the world, and that it's unfair, and there's so much inequality in the world that something has to be done. I mean, it's something that young people usually do. I think still today, I think the young people actually are moved by existential issues, like global issues, like environment and climate, and of course the injustice and inequality of people. Was elected into Parliament in 1991 the first time, so I think I've been 26 years. I was 8 years away in between. After my fourth term, I actually was appointed to the OSCE as a special representative for combating human trafficking, and I became a diplomat, worked internationally. And after I returned home, I was the ombudsperson for minorities, like a civil servant, human rights watchdog, for 5 years. And to me, actually, it was really healthy to see the political decisions, both international and national, how they were implemented and how they came about, not only from the legislator's point of view. And it was really, really healthy. When I came into Parliament in the 90s, be it that Finland actually had a very hard economic recession, there still was this feeling of hope, you know. There was these walls tearing down, the Soviet had fell. We lost a lot of economy, but still there was this idea that things are getting better. Also on the human rights side, the international, you know, the UN, the rule-based world side, there was a lot of convention work, and we were feeling that we were always somehow, you know, that it wasn't possible to do a pushback on human rights or well-being of people. But of course, we know today that we were wrong. It was also for me, I had grown up in a Finland where we actually felt that we had equality actually quite far. And I think for most women living still today, I think there's this fall of illusions, crumbling illusions when you actually have a family and you get into working life and you see that it isn't still quite fair and everything is not ready. I also got in my first term, I got my 3 first children. And later, when I became a minister, I got my 4th. And of course, you could see that actually a key to a lot of gender equality issues was actually the shared or the imbalance in sharing responsibilities for caring for your children, for your family, for your close ones. That's why I think it has been immensely important that the women in the Finnish parliament have been the drivers of making legislation that actually is really pushing parents to share their parental leaves. And today we have a law that says that they should share 7 months. And 7 months, it doesn't really mean that fathers actually take half, even if they have a choice to do it. So there has to be more carrots in the way that you have to go there, because it actually affects the economy of women. It still makes women poorer when they get older, that they have been away from the working life. We know that the times of having small children affects your career as a woman in a negative way, but if you are a man, actually, you only go upwards. When I was a diplomat, actually, I just want to say this more, in Vienna, and I worked with other diplomats mainly and governments from 57 countries. It was actually amazing that I learned that, because I somehow had felt, having worked with foreign affairs and international relations in the parliament before, I somehow felt that when states agree, it happens in some kind of collectiveness. But when I was in the OSCE, I noticed that actually it is about personalities and about people meeting and wanting to make a difference. And yesterday when we heard Josim Bailey, that negotiation is possible even in extremely difficult situations, when you are sort of on opposite sides. Both sides think that this is not possible, but if you want to have a solution, then you somehow can create it. And actually on the human rights side, working against human trafficking within the OSCE, you could actually see that things happened when the people in the room actually wanted things to happen, even if they had their countries behind them. It made all the difference that you had good people really pushing forwards, both to the partner, but also to the country and the legislators and everybody in your own country, because you had always to win the both teams. It was not enough to win the opposite side. So I think that was also really, really. My third learning was, sorry.
I have to with other speakers.
Yeah, I do. And I will come back to that, but also that you need also, having good legislation, you need also watchdogs that monitor that things go right.
Thank you. Elisabeth.
So, thank you very much. And I'd like to speak for an hour or so about what Ann Linde spoke about, the Nordic women mediators, something that Sweden took the initiative to widen all over the world. I've been to the global meetings, watching how it is developing on the regional level all over the world, South America, and now abolished, dismantling, even ridiculized. And I would say that it took Sweden into the Security Council. Also, but as I said, I could speak at length about this. I have here some really beautiful documents, action plan from Finland, valid now, and I hope that it will be taken seriously. It needs to be taken seriously. One about NATO. About being a woman, there are, as you know, in Finland, there are many first. The first country in the world where women had the right to vote and stand in the elections. I could continue like this. On a national level, what Eva was talking about also, about the possibilities for women to be in the political work, but also internationally. The first Assistant Secretary General to the UN system was a Finnish lady, Elisabeth, and there are many more first. I have also been the first, but unfortunately many times the last. And that is not something to be proud of. That's one negative side. If I should say one more negative thing, when I still engage in all strange things, I have a habit to say yes to everything. They look at me and they say, "Don't you have any grandchildren?" No, I don't have any grandchildren, and even if I had, I would still engage. Now, several of you have shared stories about how it is to be one of the few women in a place, and I would also share one story. When Foreign Minister, or former Foreign Minister even at that time, Erkki Tuomioja, founded Historians Without Borders in Helsinki. He told some Tuaregs from Mali, or one Tuareg from Mali, that they should speak to me as I had some experience of power sharing and autonomy. And that is how I ended up invited by a women's group in the revolutionary people in Mali. And I came there, participated in a conference with 500 delegates, and the first day I was allowed to address the audience. I did not understand that I would be the only woman during the whole week who would have the possibility to address the public. I would have said something else if I had known that. There were many women there, but they were all doing the cooking. Now, when I call them, the men mostly, Tuaregs, they start telling me, you know, we have so and so many women in this delegation going for the negotiations now. So I really think that we can make a change, and we have to join efforts and not just waiting for turning off some government somewhere that we don't like.
Thank you very much indeed, Elisabeth. Just to open this out to a wider discussion, it's very interesting. Like, my mother tells me my voice carries, I'm going to leave it. To a wider discussion, it's interesting there are some similarities and differences, and it just goes to show that women are not homogenous. We don't think we do the same things the same way, and also we have different experiences in the different parliaments we have sat in, but there's clearly a difference between Scottish and UK parliaments, and indeed the Finnish parliaments. But I wonder if I can look to the future, because we've spoken about ourselves and the wonderful achievements of all of the women on this panel. Can I ask you to consider, if you have before you a young woman considering entering the field of politics, what would your advice to her be? And I'm going to start with Sue. And this is on the basis she's entering the Scottish Parliament.
Well, yes, it would be, well, I must admit, looking forward to May. I'm not that sure if I want to do it, given some of the discourse that's going on right now. But no, I'm going to be there, and my name's going to be on the ballot in Edinburgh South West, which this is in the constituency of, this wonderful university. It doesn't matter how old the person, if it's a man or a woman and they're young, I would still say go off and do something else. I still really, really believe there's so many students go to university, and particularly at Edinburgh, to study politics with this aspiration that they can all of a sudden become a politician. But the only way to be good at what you do is if you've done something else before you can come into that building. And if you've lived in that political bubble, worked in that political bubble, and that's all you've known, you cannot serve the constituents that you are elected to serve. And that would be my one piece of feedback. And that goes from somebody at primary school when they've spoken to me, or somebody in their 20s. Go off and have a career and then come back in.
And I'm going to push a bit further and say, what happens in the interim period when we have what we have, are the people who are departing Parliament, and some excellent people who are departing Parliament at the end of this term, and the loss will be felt, or it should certainly be felt by Parliament. What happens in the interim period when we don't have anyone filling that gap, and we have more career politicians coming in?
But you don't have to fill the gap with 20-year-old young people. You can find people like myself and Michelle that were I was in my 40s when I came to it, or in your 30s, or, there's whole lots of different people that can come. And I think it's about, and the one way to attract people, I was sitting when I was working going, one day I'm going to go in there and I'll be better than those people that are in there now. But right now I need to do what I'm doing. Okay, that was what my thought process was. And that time came when Ruth Davidson picked up the phone and asked me to stand, and I said yes. And I was mid-40s. And you have that awakening, you have the time in your life, and you know it's right. And you just got to, it can't be as toxic as it is now, because people look and they go, why would I want to go in there? You can't do anything without having your life ruined on social media. You can't go out for dinner without having someone, some of the horrific correspondence that we get. And until that changes, I think it's going to be very difficult to encourage anybody, but I don't think that's the issue at the moment, I think, and certainly in Scottish politics.
Thank you, Sue. Michelle, following on from that then, if we follow Sue's, I would say, excellent advice, have a career, have a life first, it's then down to, of course, the political party and how they choose their candidates, how they wish their party to be reflected in Parliament. And clearly they have the choice to have people with no experience who maybe have less value, not saying they don't have anything to offer, but perhaps less value than those who have more experience. How do we then square the circle that it has to be within the will of the political parties to choose their candidates accordingly?
Before I answer that, I'll just say one extra statement of what I would say to the young person. I would say, find yourself a mentor. Indeed, if they were interested, I would offer to mentor them. I've mentored young women for at least 25 years in the various career things, and I think it's really, really important. And being completely frank, I've not had a mentor in my political career, and perhaps it shows. I wish I had have done. So going on to your question, of course, all political parties have a shared responsibility, and we've seen different times where they've taken it quite seriously. So, for example, my own political party took it really quite seriously for a period of time. In 2021, we're now at 46% of the Scottish Parliament are women, and for this forthcoming election in 2026, they said, oh well, that's sorted then, so we don't need to do anything. And guess what? The vast majority of people selected are men. And I am willing to bet at least my Border Terrier's life that the percentage of women are going to go down in the Scottish Parliament. And I think political parties have to take it so seriously. And if you've grown up, as I have done, through the idea whether you should have positive mechanisms, When I was younger, I was like, no, 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 you don't need them. I can do it by dint of hard work and determination and grit. And guess what? The dial really hasn't shifted enough. There's still significant systemic issues permeating our politics, not just the number, but how we do our politics. So each political party has to be held to account, and that saying, what is happening at this? And being honest, I feel as though I spend most of my life chastising my own political party about things I don't think they're doing enough of, or perhaps sometimes no longer the same balance. Actually, we need young. Let go, you know. I mean, it's been some. Us who have come through the same route.
On this point, and developing the point a bit further, you know, being a young person in politics, in elected politics, is not an easy place to be because of the abuse that one faces on social media simply for existing as a female politician. So I wonder if I could ask you your thoughts about that, but also about the importance of having support or mentorship from within your party to ensure that you are the best you can possibly be as a parliamentarian.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of general reflections. I agree with a lot of what's been said by Sue and Michelle, and don't want what I've said so far to be taken to infer that I don't think there should be any young people in Parliament. Clearly, young people should be represented, but many of the candidates we're looking at, certainly in my political party, the SNP, for the next election in Scotland, are young people who've come straight from college or university and have no experience beyond politics, and I think there's too many of them, and there's not enough people with hinterlands. And I also think one of the things we should think about doing in Scotland and the United Kingdom is holding political primaries to select candidates. The leadership of political parties and the clique that run, the people that actually turn up at branch meetings, which is always a tiny percentage of people who are members, tend to very much control the selection of candidates. And I think it would be very interesting to have open or closed primaries to select candidates. That would bring more interesting people into politics. But in terms of supporting people, I mean, you know yourself, Tasmina, when you were a member of the SNP, you did a lot of work to encourage female candidates coming into the party. And I know the Conservatives had a fantastic organisation called Women to Win, which brought lots of women into Conservative Party politics. And I know the Labour Party also have, over the years, have done similar things. So the political parties themselves have to make sure that they expend resources in having support for female candidates. You know, on the social media front, you know, there's not much we can do about social media. I don't really think. I'm very much in favour of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, so I don't want to see excessive censorship or any censorship, really. I'm very much against that. But I do think people in positions of political leadership have a responsibility to foster an environment where people are free to state their beliefs without having others jump down their throats immediately, and where the distinction between lively debate and abusive debate is made, and that people are encouraged to debate in a lively and challenging fashion, but to take the abusive element out of it. And that won't happen in our political discourse until people in positions of political leadership lead by example and crack down within their own parties when there are problems with one group having an ascendancy and very much shutting down the debate on certain issues. So I think, you know, a lot of this is down to the leadership of the political parties.
Thank you, Joanna. Before I move away from that point, actually I'm going to go on to Finland, because it's interesting. Equality, in your opening remarks, doesn't seem to be an issue in terms of numbers. We've heard from Michelle here, if you don't have some action to ensure the numbers are good and are representative of us as a society, then we don't have the best outcomes in terms of legislation. What are the bigger problems in Finland if you don't think, unless I've misheard you, that the numbers are a problem?
No, I definitely think the numbers are a problem, but of course we are almost half. And never been more than half, which of course is not normal. There should be sometimes more women and sometimes more men. It should sort of go around the 50-50, sort of, not in a way that there's very rarely more women. But I think that you have to, I think research shows that electoral systems play a big part. And when there's majority voting, that's very hard for young people and for women and for minorities. So to be sure that you have you have to somehow correct it and to look into the electoral systems also to be sure that you have diversity, because I think that's the issue, is that we have had too many just older men. That's the main problem. But of course it's not enough to have representation in the voting. You also have to see that women gain positions that are leading positions. And at least in Finland it has been harder on local level than on national level, but we still see stereotyping ways to choose between, you see these kind of stereotypically male dominant areas or sort of sectors like defense and then social and health, where women have much bigger. Also, when we have actually a council that we have actually systematically following who is using the voice in which kind of debates, what kind of experts are we listening to, when are we listening to gender researchers, when are we listening, in what way is it biased? And it still looks that it's actually extremely biased when you look at who is expert in what affair, in what kind of legislation. So if you don't really actively, and I think that goes a little bit what Ann Linde said before, that if you don't actively and systematically carry data and how you make the choices, then you won't be aware, because you don't notice it, because we are all in this bias. The second thing is actually, I think that young women seem to, we have always, of course, in particular when you are young, I think it goes better when you get older. You don't meet so much harassment when you get older. You have it completely in a different way when you are a young woman. You get it from the public and you get it from colleagues. But I think in particular the difference today is that of course we are much more aware, but I think the amount of hate speech and sexual violence in social media and in the debates has risen, which I didn't experience in such an enormous amount when I was a young politician. And I think it has partly silenced some of the young women and also scared them away from politics, that it's too ugly. Mm-hmm. I remember when I came into parliament and I was 30 years old, it took me at least 2.5 years because I admitted that I was so stupid. And of course I wasn't stupid. So
thank you. Elisabeth, no doubt, well, do you share Eva's view on that, and would you be encouraging young women in Finland into politics?
I would like to share my special experience. I come from the Åland Islands with only one constituency. So we have a habit, I was a civil servant, so this was not a problem to me, but we have the habit to leave the political...
A little bit down you can.
Further,
political... Like this? Okay. To leave the political party and join the Swedish speakers group. And then being always suspected for belonging to all sort of strange group. Maybe she's a social democrat. Maybe she's conservative. Maybe she's supporting the independence movement. You never know with this woman. And of course, that may be having to work over the party lines and join for example, the women group in the parliament is a cross-border cooperation, and this has been my main focus, to be able to work with as many as possible. You have to, if you represent a minority, and you should work with minority questions. So that is what I would like to, that's the advice I would like to give to a young person, that join forces, because we need more women in the Oval Office.
Thank fabulous. And following on, well, for sure. Following on from that, I have two questions that I'm going to ask you. The last one I'm going to give you advance notice of, and that's I'm going to ask you in 3 words to describe what it's like being a women politician. But before you answer that question, while you're thinking about the answer to that question, we often say that we look for the support of men in advancing women and the cause of women and women's participation and success in politics. But I want to ask you this question. Are women doing enough to help women in politics? Sue?
No. Do you want me to explain?
I do. I do.
Well, I think, especially at this point in the electoral cycle, we're all just looking out for ourselves. And it's really difficult. You asked earlier on, what would you do if I really wanted to stand? And you're like,
On my seat.
on my seat. You know, you are all looking out now because that's the job, and that's the harsh reality of it. I think if you look back to I've got 2 women of a similar age to myself that I've just moved into Edinburgh from West Lothian, and I am trying to actively work with them to encourage them to maybe consider looking to become a candidate, but perhaps at local government elections first, not because I don't want them standing in my patch, but it's more, I really think that's a good grounding to get a bit of sense and really get into your community, because I think my introduction was all about being connected to the community and having that activism, and that gives you that understanding in the belief system as to why you're getting into this job in the first place, because you want to help people. And if you're getting in it to help yourself, then that's not why you should be doing politics. But if you're getting into it because you want to help that community be stronger, more resilient, get more homes, get better healthcare, but get better education, then that's a great motivation. I stood as a councillor and I fought to keep 2 local high schools open because the council wanted to close them, and I beat the council with a massive community behind me. And that's what then gave me the courage and the confidence to go on and know that I'd be a good MSP. So I think that's the sort of discussion. Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Michelle, do women help other women
Not-
enough
not-
at all?
Not enough. I think, and this is something I believe I put into practice, I help other women from other political parties. You never know when you'll need someone in politics, so actually there's a very sensible reason that, build strategic alliances cross-party is a good thing generally, but it's even better with women helping women, and it's something that I've always done, and I think it's entirely possible, but that's the way my approach to politics, to do your politics in the chamber and to build strategic alliances and help and support people. You will get it back in droves, you just don't know when. So I think that's absolutely vital.
Joanna?
I'm not going to be terribly original, but I think women don't do enough to help other women within their own political parties because the sort of internecine warfare and the precedents, and that's perhaps inevitable. But I think we have seen, to say something positive, in Scotland we have seen recently very positive examples of women working together at a grassroots level and also on a cross-party basis over the issue of preserving women's rights and also the rights of LGBT people to be same-sex attracted in the face of a government and a parliament that wished to impose gender identity ideology on all of us when nobody had really voted for it. So it's been a grassroots movement, and I've worked very closely with feminists and other parties, including the Conservative Party, to face down successfully that policy. And it's not all done now, there's still a lot to be done, but we are winning. And I know Sue and Michelle have been very strong voices in the Parliament, albeit from very different political perspectives. So there's a very good example of some women at least working across party lines and at a grassroots level to help other women.
Even then, Elisabeth, women helping women in Finland?
Thank you. I think we do actually, but I also think it's not so perhaps so that we are so much kinder. But I think our the electoral system, when you actually from Helsinki, the capital of Finland, actually you choose perhaps 20 persons into parliament. It's always easier when there's not only one. You don't have to compete really for one seat. You can be. It's more complicated who you are actually competing with. And in that sense, actually, you can work together easier. So I think that's one part. But I also feel that at least during my political career, I think that other women politicians from other parties, but also from my own, but really cross-party, have been the biggest supporters. And I always carry with me when we had the President Halonen, who was our first female president from a different party. She's Social Democrats and I'm a Liberal. And I was a young mother of 3 in my first term in Parliament. And of course, I was really like fighting, being bad everywhere. I felt, oh, I'm a bad mother, and I'm a bad politician, and everything that I couldn't have the time. And of course, I couldn't say this because, of course, as a young woman, you want to say that you actually are dealing really fine with this, having 3 kids and being. So, and also when I became a minister, I got my 4th child, and also then everything went extremely well. But the president said to me that, well, Eva, you have to remember that your children need to learn that their mother is also there for other children in the world. And to me, that worked. It was really very nicely put, I think. And I have carried it with me, I think, forever. It meant a lot. It was just one sentence, but it really meant a lot.
Thank you. But Elisabeth, last few words from you on this, and then I'm going to ask you all for your 3 words.
Well, I don't carry with me this experience with small kids and a part in the Parliament, so I think I will give a very traditional answer and say that we do not do enough. We could do more. And maybe it is also on the structure. We don't think about that so often, that we should think more about the structures, about getting women into different positions, etc. But this was a very traditional answer. Eva's answer was much better.
While you have the mic, Elisabeth, your 3 words. What's it like to be a woman in politics? 3 words.
It is challenging, it is rewarding, it is an adventure.
Thank you. Eva.
I also think it's extremely exciting. It was only one word, exciting. Being angry all the time, that's not one word either. I'm very bad at answering how you ask. Angry, excited, and sometimes satisfied.
Joanna.
I'm not going to say exciting, I'll say stimulating instead. Stimulating, exhausting, and frustrating.
Yeah, frustrating is a good word.
I've got the same word there, Joanna. I've got exhausting, exhilarating, and privilege.
Michelle.
True.
I've got a serious one, an honour and a responsibility. But I also said facetiously, bloody great fun.
Oh, great. Well, delegates, can I just say that there are women in politics and there are women who should be in power, and these women are all of the latter, and I wish they were. Please join me in saying a huge thank you to our panel, Elisabeth,